Thank you, Chairman Burnham Wahlberg, for holding this meeting today. And I'd like to thank my colleague, Ranking Member Mark Takano, for what you do each and every day for working families. And certainly to the witnesses who you will be bringing your experiences to this issue. I'd like to start by offering my thoughts and prayers to the people of Texas and Florida and all those who have been impacted by the devastating storms over the last 2 weeks. There are 60,000 what they call storm break workers in those two states restoring power. One of the most dangerous jobs that you can imagine. But today we're here to consider a bill that attacks workers' rights to fight for better wages and conditions. Employers have increasingly moved away from direct hiring, relying on leased employees, subcontractors, permatemp. There's approximately 3 million Americans that are now employed by temporary staffing agencies, and 1/5 of all new jobs since 2009 have been through those temp agencies. Labor employment laws have long held that multiple joint employers, when more than one entity controls the terms and conditions of employment. This bill would rig the National Labor Relations Act and the Fair Labor Standards Act to make it nearly impossible for workers to hold joint employers responsible for unfair labor practices, wage theft, or others. Research shows that the fissuring of the workforce through increased outsourcing is already contributing to wage stagnation, and this bill would make that problem even worse. The joint employer standard that exists today started out in common law standard, that has existed for hundreds of years. In America, that standard has existed through most of the 20th century and exactly intended to do what it is doing. But when the NLRB narrowed that joint employer standard back in 1984, it made it easier for companies to evade this joint employer. So from 1935 to 1984, it was the same standard. Hundreds of decisions were made based on that, and it wasn't until 1984 that that changed. In 2015, the NLRB considered a case where workers at Browning Ferris BFI recycling plant wanted to organize a union. These workers were hired by the staffing agency Lead Point to sort recyclable materials at the BFI's facility. But BFI capped their wages and assigned the workers shifts. BFI claimed that it wasn't the employer, but here's the problem. If worker had joined the union with Lead Point as the only employer, then Lead Point wouldn't be able to bargain over anything without BFI's permission. Workers wouldn't even be able to bargain for better wages because the amount of Lead Point could pay was capped by BFI. The NLRB finding that BFI was a joint employer, and this is critical to help raise wages. So let's look what happened at the table. They're behind you and on the walls, showing the disparity in those wages since the Lead Point came into this equation. It made the wages of workers in nearly all the plants that have unions were from $19 to $30 an hour, plus health care, retirement savings. Lead Point only made $12.50 an hour, total package. Without being able to bargain with both of their employers, Lead Point BFI workers and hundreds of thousands like them will never see their wages rise again. And this isn't the only example, and we've seen these trends continue. Mr. Chairman, I ask for unanimous consent to introduce this document, which lists 3 primary cases that the Carpenters Union has dealt with into the record.
That objection, so ordered.
Thank you. The right to join a union and collectively bargain helps workers raise wages. I've lived this. I fought on behalf of workers to raise wages for almost 2 decades. This bill enables corporations to keep wages low by subcontracting out the work. They are subcontracting their conscience to put profits over people. This bill even goes further. It amends the FLSA, the Fair Labor Standards Act, to prevent workers from holding employers accountable for wage theft, overtime violations, or others. It immunizes the employers from child labor violations under this bill. All a company has to do to outsource control is just one essential term of employment. Just one essential term of employment to its subcontracting. You could be scheduling. This bill relieves that company from any liability on wage theft for which it would be responsible. This is where I think the crux of what we're discussing today comes down to. This bill is pushing for a solution in search of a problem when it claims this bill would help franchisees. The current joint employer standards do not hurt franchisees in any way. There are approximately 800,000 franchisees in this country. The NLRB has never found one of them was a joint employer. 800,000 and not one decision to create a joint employer. It's a remarkable fact. But it's an important fact when we're talking about what we're trying to do here today. That's because the board carefully draws a line between what a franchisor maintains its brand, like requiring training on how to prepare hamburgers, hot dogs, or whatever else that the company produces. But they also do something now, the terms and conditions, wages, benefits, and hold that subcontractor to their exact standards. Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to work on this legislation and would help small businesses and raise wages. This bill does neither. It empowers massive corporations and stagnant wages at a time when working families need relief. I'll remind everybody, it's been a decade since a vote was taken on the minimum wage. It's been 8 years since they received a raise. We should be lifting people up, not pushing wages down. While we disagree on the merits of the bill, I want to thank the chairman for following regular order. I want to thank each of the witnesses for traveling to Washington and look forward to your testimony. Thank you.